All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, just a couple of those normal reminders. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. You can type those in by clicking the Q&A or that chat section in the lower portion of your control panel. Feel free, as always, to chat between yourselves as well throughout. We'll be posting a recording of the webinar on our blog. The link for that will be shown at the end. And if you'd like a PDF copy of the presentation, there's going to be recipes today, so you probably will. There will be a link to download that on that same post as the recording. If your question does not get answered today, or if you think of any others, please email our support inbox, which will be shown at the end as well. All right, what is on the agenda for today? Easy ways to eat more veggies. This can be a struggle for a lot of us, right? Getting in enough veggies regularly can be tough. Maybe we had a bad experience in the past with them. Maybe we don't necessarily know how to prepare them, or we think it's going to be too hard to, or we don't have a plan for them, so we buy them and then they go bad before we have a chance to use them, right? Whatever reasons you have for not getting in enough veggies, today the goal is to give you a quick overview of why we should be eating veggies and then some easy ways, hopefully easy, to incorporate them into your life. And like I said, you'll even get a few recipes to try out if you want. So let's get started really quickly on kind of why we should even think about why should we bother with vegetables, right? What are the main benefits of eating them consistently? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this and I'm not going to cover everything, but if you need more motivation to eat them, do some research on this. I'm going to bet that it will give you a push to add them more often if you look at all of the benefits of the different veggies. But high level here, inflammation. Inflammation is good when we have an injury or an infection in our body, but too much, or what they call chronic inflammation, can have a negative effect on our body and cause issues with things like our heart, our brain, our joints, different things like that. So, according to an article from Harvard, following diets like the MIND diet and Mediterranean diet, which I'm going to touch on the MIND diet here in another couple minutes, but those diets are really heavy on veggies, specifically green leafy veggies, and can help counter that chronic inflammation. Digestion is another benefit of vegetables. Most are a really good source of fiber, which is crucial when it comes to our digestion. Heart health. Vitamin K, which is in many vegetables, is believed to prevent calcium from building up in your arteries, which in turn can lower that risk of damage and help prevent issues in the future with our heart. Blood pressure is part of heart health as well, right? Many vegetables contain potassium, which helps your kidneys filter sodium out of your body more efficiently, which can help reduce blood pressure. Blood sugar. Now, we might think this is a little bit different, right? Because some vegetables can be higher in carbohydrates, which a lot of us are told carbohydrates are what we want to stay away from. But vegetables are so good for our blood sugar because diabetes is connected with insulin resistance, which is associated with things like heart disease, cholesterol, and blood pressure, which, as we now know, right, are helped by veggies. And specifically non-starchy vegetables, so ones that are lower in those carbs in relation to all the other ones, things like broccoli, zucchini, cucumbers, kale, are great low glycemic foods, which means that they don't cause the spike in blood sugar like other foods can. And they still give you a ton of great benefits, so many nutrients in those types of foods. Veggies benefit your brain as well. I mentioned the MIND diet with inflammation. There's a reason it's called that. It stands for Mediterranean slash DASH, which are two different diets, intervention for neurodegenerative delay. It's specifically designed to help reduce your risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And again, it includes many, many, many vegetables. Immune system. We think of vitamin C a lot when we think of immune system, right? Did you know that broccoli has more vitamin C than an orange? Veggies like bell peppers and kale have a bunch as well. And really, just having a well balanced diet with healthy foods in general, including your veggies, is going to help you fight illness, right? It just helps your body function overall. So, veggies should have a place at the table as much as possible. So, I know I didn't surprise a lot of you with these benefits, right? It's not a secret that vegetables are healthy. Most of us know that we should eat more, but now comes the hard part, right? How are we going to do that? Like I mentioned in the beginning, there are various reasons why we don't get enough in, but let's turn that focus to how to change that and figure out how to start increasing our daily intake. So I'm going to start with adding them in. Add veggies to what you may already eat. That's a great place to start. So, for example, you eat eggs in the morning. Maybe throw in some chopped peppers, mushrooms, tomatoes, spinach, or kale. Casseroles are great at hiding veggies too. I don't want to say hide because, we don't want to be afraid of them, but, a lot of times we do want to just put them in there because we might like the taste of something else, right? But shredded carrots, spinach, broccoli, onions, so many options to throw into a casserole that already has a lot of ingredients. You can add those into the shredded veggies into your burgers or sloppy joes as well. You've got soups and chili, where I know a lot of people, you just kind of dump and go, right? Whatever, cook it in the slow cooker and boom, you've got a meal. Marinara sauce and pasta dishes are another easy way to sneak in those chopped up veggies. Even baked goods are great at putting them in. I'm going to have a recipe here for that just in a minute. And then if you're having a sandwich, right, just load up on those veggies, double what you normally would, and get in even more nutrients. So it doesn't have to be complicated, right? Just think of things you are already eating and see if there's any ways you can sneak some veggies in. And smoothies as well. I added this to this list, but because most people think smoothies, or if you're making smoothies, a lot of people focus on the fruit, right? But there's ton of veggies that you can add into those fruit smoothies along with the fruit to have for breakfast, snack, or whatever makes sense in your day to get in some awesome nutrients. So, as promised, I'm going to share a couple recipes after each tip. So, let's get started with some zucchini muffins. Side note, you will be able to download the slides on the post if you don't have time to screenshot, because I'm not going to go through all the recipes. So, if you can screenshot, go ahead. If not, it will be available on our blog to download. So, don't worry, you'll have a chance to get the recipes if you do want to try them. Now, this is a quote healthier muffin recipe too, but if you have your own that you love, just look to add some shredded zucchini. It's not about changing everything. One step, like adding an additional nutrient without needing to take away anything else, makes it really easy to make those changes, right? Just note with this one, and with adding veggies, squeezing out excess moisture of different things, especially zucchini, because it holds a lot of moisture. Just make sure you're doing those steps because it can mess up the consistency. And like I'm going to say, you're going to mess up recipes, right? It's going to happen when you're trying new things, but don't give up. Try different recipes, try new things, be open. You'll find something that works for you. And then I threw in a smoothie recipe as well. Smoothies in general have endless combinations of fruits and veggies to use. So I just randomly picked a mango and spinach one. So with these, try different fruits, try different veggies, try different amounts of each, different other additions like the type of yogurt, the type of milk, different liquids until you find ones that work for you. I can promise you there's some sort of combination out there that you're going to like that you can have more veggies in a smoothie. All right. Next tip is to swap it. So this is where we take that next step, replacing some of your normal food options with veggie options. So this can go in a lot of different directions, and I'm certainly not going to cover everything. So this is where I want the chat to blow up here. So throw some options in the chat while I give some examples too. But different things to think about as far as swapping it. If you're out to eat, can you replace a side of fries with a side salad or a steamed veggies option? You can do that at home too, right? But I just don't want you to forget about restaurants and the fact that you do have choices at restaurants too. And no, you don't always have to choose the veggie option if there's other things that you like. But if you do it sometimes, it's going to benefit you, right? Those nutrients are always helping for you. And then swapping the main course for veggies isn't as hard as it sounds either. So, for example, salad base, throw some protein on there, throw a ton of other veggies on there. That's a super filling meal. Replacing snacks with veggies. Someone already put some in there. The carrots and hummus instead of chips. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. So, the sliced veggies with hummus or homemade ranch dip. And like I put chips as a separate bullet point. They fall into the snack category, but I just want to highlight because there's a ton of veggie chip options out there now. And yes, if we're being technical, potato chips are technically made by vegetables, but they tend to be very processed most of the time, right? So that's where we're going. We want a healthier option. So discovering some different veggies to make your crunchy snack out of. So things like beets, carrots, kale, radishes, zucchini, spinach, eggplant, just to name a few of the options for some healthier veggie swaps for chips. Recipe coming shortly. Other things to swap a veggie option for includes pasta. I think someone put that in there. You can buy veggie pasta now, but you can also make your own. You can have a spiralizer tool if you want to try that. Again, the goal is to really just add in some more nutrient dense foods rather than the refined pastas that don't really bring much as far as health benefits, right? I think I saw someone talk about cauliflower. The next three cauliflower is an option. Rice, mashed potatoes, pizza crust are all real alternatives that you can make out of cauliflower. Now, with everything, I'm not going to say that it's a direct substitute for taste all the time, right? There's a reason that those things are loaded with fats and things like that. Our body responds to that. But if you can try something new, you're going to find something that you can enjoy. And again, it's about just trying different things. And then, of course, we have burgers, right? Someone already mentioned the buns. You can do a lettuce wrap instead of a bun. So, boom, right there. And then the actual burgers, there are a ton of pre-made options out there for veggie burgers now. And then again, you can look to make your own. So, with things like mushrooms, quinoa, black beans, lentils, you can find a quote burger with just about any veggie included. Be adventurous, step out of that comfort zone. Again, give something a try. So, with that, here is a spicy black bean burger with chipotle mayo. Very fancy. If you don't like the heat, like me, who's a huge wimp when it comes to spice, I almost didn't put this one on there, but I know other people like spice. You can take out the cumin and the hot sauce and use regular mayo if you want. Again, with recipes, yes, there are instructions, but you can adjust them as you see fit to add some different things in there. But again, this is a burger that just, again, you're getting in nutrients. You're getting in just different options. We want a variety of foods in our diet. This is going to give you a ton of variety. And then beet chips. I went with the beets for the chips because I don't think most people would think about this, right? Again, there's so many options when it comes to the types of veggies that you can try, either with the chips, roasting them and making like this, or, however you want to do it. A lot of you are talking about, doing the sliced things and like the kale chips and different things like that. That's exactly what we need to do. We can add in different things, and it's going to be easier than we think to get in some of those nutrients and some of those veggies that we want. So again, do a quick Google search. You'll have countless, literally countless things to try, right? If you're talking about new recipes. All right, next way to think about getting in more veggies during your week is to prep it or buy it. So, how many of you have purchased veggies? I talked about this once already, to have them rot away in the veggie drawer. Yep, me too. Right? So, something as simple as cutting them up right away when you get them, or buying them pre-cut could be the answer to you actually using and eating those veggies. Now, this is more like the raw veggies and things like that, but same thing with recipes. If you have a plan, which I'll talk about here in a second, if you have a plan for them, then you're a lot more likely to use them. But again, it seems silly to think, oh, I don't want to spend that extra 3 minutes cutting up those peppers because I want a snack now. It happens, right? I'm much more inclined to grab a quicker snack than to take that 3 minutes. Whereas if those are already done, you're going to grab it. right? It's going to be that much easier. So if you want to do it yourself, set aside that time to go to the store, chop those peppers or cucumbers or whatever it is, put them in a single serving container that you can grab and throw in your lunch or grab for a snack. And if you don't think you'll have the time to do it for yourself or don't, won't want to in the moment, buy those pre-cut ones. They are more expensive, right? It is what it is. But if you think that's going to get you to actually use them, if you're going to waste them by not eating them, you're still wasting money in the other side, right? So if this will get you to actually eat those veggies, might be worth a shot. The other thing to think about is to not forget about frozen or canned veggies too. So, for those of us who don't have access to fresh vegetables all year round, frozen is a great option to be able to get those nutrients in. And a lot of them come in things like steamer bags. So, you can literally put it in the microwave for a couple minutes and it's ready to go, right? It can't get any easier than that. Now, the reason frozen is typically recommended over canned is that they're typically frozen at peak freshness, meaning peak nutrient density as well. Canned can sometimes lose that freshness, and also sometimes canned can have some added ingredients. This is not always true, so if you prefer canned, it's still better than many other options, and you're still getting some nutrients, so go for it, right? But frozen is typically considered a little better option, so just keep that in mind. And then, like I was saying, when you're talking about veggie prepping, as in cutting them up, don't forget about just meal prepping in general as well. Creating meals ahead of time and either storing them in a fridge or freezer can be a fantastic way to not only get in more veggies, but to help with your time management, which helps with stress management, right? Eating more meals at home, which typically translates into eating a bit healthier as well. Again, not always, but typically, if we're prepping these healthier options, you will be healthier. And so, when it comes to vegetables specifically, there's some things to think about if you do plan to make meals ahead of time or sides ahead of time. So, I found this online, I thought was really helpful. Roasting and grilling veggies helps to remove moisture, which makes veggies less likely to get soggy when they're in your fridge during the week. Sauteing vegetables, it can help maintain some of the crispness while being stored. Boiling versus blanching. So we'll talk about these methods in a few slides, but if you just boil, it can make some veggies soggy and they're not going to heat up very well. While blanching, which means putting them in cold water right after you get to that consistency you want, can help retain more of that crispness in the future. Slow cooking vegetables in soups and stews is a great way to prep them as well. And then again, easy. And then you've got a meal there and then you've got a meal later. Raw vegetables, I think you guys are talking about storing vegetables and stuff in mason jars and things. Yeah, airtight container is really what does it, right? Reduces the likelihood things drying out or spoiling faster. So look for some good containers to keep either raw veggies or pre-cooked, pre-prepped in a good spot to last as long as possible. Because again, that's how we get rid of the waste. That's how we have good options at home when we're planning ahead like that. And then if you are cooking the vegetables, place them on a sheet tray and allow them to cool before putting them in their containers. That's just going to help avoid that excess moisture, right? You've seen that when you put hot foods in those containers, it immediately, the condensation comes up, which makes things soggy. And especially things like vegetables that are, they're more susceptible to that and not tasting as good. So just a couple things to think about if you are prepping those ahead of time. You certainly don't have to, but again, just some things to think about. All right, super simple meal prep recipe for just a sheet meal prep, just for roasting. You can cook this up on a Sunday. Split them up, put them in containers. This one suggested adding it to quinoa and having, a full meal in there. But again, they're ready for lunch or snacks or suppers for the whole week. Now, roasting, I'll say this again, is my favorite type of prepping veggies because you literally just throw in what you like, toss it in some olive oil, put on some garlic or whatever you want. Again, this recipe calls for whatever kind of seasoning that you want. And then you throw it in the oven and it cooks it and you're done. It really doesn't get easier. And you can sub out the protein for no protein if you want to, or you can do chicken or meatballs, something like that, whatever you want. Same with the veggies. I know in our house we like to add asparagus to a recipe like this as well. So again, you might have to experiment a little bit, but don't think that a recipe is the end all be all. You can change things up and see what makes sense for you. All right, last tip is try it. Different ways again to utilize this tip. First is just try different ways of prepping your veggies. You know, when we talk about different ways we try it, you can change the flavor so much just by preparing things differently. And that doesn't only go with veggies, but obviously that's what we're talking about today. It can make a huge difference in you liking something or not. So I'm going to go through just a couple ways to prep veggies. Again, do your research, see what makes sense for you. But boiling, I talked about this already. It's super simple. You just have to be mindful of the timing. You know, you can overcook them a little bit. They can get mushy and you can cook out the nutrients even sometimes if you go too far. But again, you just have to kind of keep an eye on them. It's not going to take a lot of time for most veggies. Once you see them get brighter in color, you can test the, tenderness or the consistency for your preference, and then you're done. Now, again, they're still going to cook a little bit after you take them out of the water, so you can do that blanching method, like I mentioned a few slides ago, right? Veggies that lend themselves well to boiling are things like broccoli, green beans, cauliflower. You can also simmer veggies, which means that you add in the veggies before the water boils, letting them cook at a lower temperature for a longer time. So veggies that need to cook longer, like potatoes, beets, turnips, are good for this method. Again, people have different preferences for tenderness, so test them out every so often, get that texture you like. Steaming is another prep method. This is a really good way to get that same flavor as the boiling, but for more tender veggies like asparagus, greens, things like that. You retain a lot of the nutrients with steaming as well. Um, there are actual steaming appliances out there for vegetables, right? But if you don't have that, you can just bring water to a boil and then there's steamer baskets or a metal colander and you just pop in those veggies. And then again, you can flavor it up. You can add things like garlic or ginger to the water, or you can do, some of that seasoning afterwards. Again, just keeping an eye on the tenderness and the color. Like I said before too, there's steamer bags that you don't need any prep for, that you can just find in the freezer section. But just keep an eye on the ingredients, just to be sure there's not a lot of extra stuff in some of those freezer bags. I mentioned steaming to soften foods to saute, or I didn't mention that actually, but you can steam foods to saute them. So let's talk about that method. It's a fast method. So if you're thinking time, basically you just cook veggies in high heat in oil, right? So it does help keep nutrients intact and it works for almost every veggie. You just have to be sure that your veggies are equal size so they're cooking at the same speed. And then again, adding those flavors, all of those things that you want. Experiment, use your imagination, flavor it up. Stir frying, I always thought that was the same thing as sauteing. It is not. Stir frying is even higher temperature, and that's one where you constantly stir and toss the veggies so they're not going to burn, right? You just have everything prepped if you want to do it. People are mentioning air fryer too. I don't personally have an air fryer, but I know a ton of people who do. So I would do research on that. I think that's absolutely a reasonable thing to do. And it would be similar to roasting, right? I would assume roasting and baking, because you're frying it without the oils, like you said. So, do some research. I'm sure there's lots of tips and recipes, because we know how popular air fryers are. So yeah, roasting, like I said, similar to that. It's super easy, which is why I like it the most and why I already gave you a recipe using it. But it's also a really good starter method because when we roast veggies, we get natural sugars that come out and you can typically get a really nice flavor. Oh, someone just said air fryer sweet potatoes are the best. Boom. You heard it right there. We got people that know. So, give it a try. But again, same with roasting, you can season with whatever you want, toss it in some olive oil, stick it in the oven, and you're basically done, right? You just need to make sure, again, you cut the veggies the same size so they're cooking at the same speed. Um, Baking is similar to roasting, but you just you typically have it covered so you're not getting that caramelization like you do with the roasting. So it just comes down to a preference thing, in my opinion. A lot of you mentioned grilling, that you liked grilling too. So that's a really fun preparation in my eyes because it reminds you of summer and fun, right? Most of the time for grilling veggies, you'll typically, marinate them in something first. Not always, but you can, or then toss them in your oil and seasonings. And you can, there's tin foil things, grill baskets. You can throw them right on the grill if you're more talented than I am, and it won't fall through. But lots of ways to grill too. And again, the flavor that comes through when you grill is awesome. So again, definitely more out there. I love that you're sharing different options. Keep that up. And so you've got some new ways to prep veggies, right? Next goal is to go out and try it. So try new veggies too while you're at it. There's so many interesting foods out there to try. Stop at your local farmer's market if you have one, or join a CSA, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture. Basically, you kind of subscribe and you get a regular box of different in season fruits and veggies from local farmers. So supporting small business, trying new yummy foods, win win, right? And then don't forget to try veggies again. We already talked about this. You may not have liked something the first time you had it, especially when we're kids, right? We don't like anything when we're kids. But remember that our taste change and something you thought you didn't like might be right up your alley now. And again, preparing it differently can completely change the taste of food. So don't give up if you mess up that new way of prepping because you will. Right? Keep trying, keep looking for new and fresh ways to add in these foods because your health is absolutely going to benefit from doing it as much as you can. And then to end, here's a grilling recipe. So again, this is kind of just anything and everything. I liked this recipe because it was just like, hey, we're gonna throw a bunch of stuff on there. It gives tips for how long to do it in each of them. But yeah, again, try different things, try different seasonings, get a grill basket if you need them. I saw someone just put that in there. But yeah, try different things, see what works for you. But yeah, doesn't that look yummy, right? That's the thing. We can make so many different things in different ways, and we can hopefully want and be excited to eat our veggies. So let's wrap it up here. I got a couple minutes to spare, but really simple. Getting in enough veggies, it doesn't have to be a chore. It doesn't have to be hard, right? It's about finding small ways to add them in, finding what you like, and prepping it in different ways to keep it fresh. Don't be afraid to try something new. You might surprise yourself with the different veggies that you're going to like. All right, before we get to questions, if there are any, I think you guys can just keep sharing your tips. I think that's fantastic. But upcoming webinars, maximize your workout. Coach Jamie's going to come back and she's going to talk about how to be efficient with your workout because we all know that we need more time in our life. And then August is the science of breath work. We're going to talk about different ways, different breathing can just help in maybe ways that you're not even familiar with. So that'll be a good one too. If you do get points for lifestyle rewards, some companies will ask you to answer a few questions. So, nothing super complicated here. But if you do need those questions, here they are. I'll give you a second to screenshot. Otherwise, they will be on the slides to download within the next day or two as well. So, again, most of you won't need this, but just in case you do, you can give it a quick shot. And then here is our contact information. We are on social media. Hopefully, you watched last month's webinar talking about social media, and hopefully, you've been able to balance that a little bit better. But if you are on social media, when you are, you can look us up there. And then that blog, that's where you're gonna watch the past webinar. You can watch this webinar within the next day or two, and this is where you'll be able to download the slides too. So healthcheck360.com/blog is where you're going to go for that. And then if you do want to chat with a health coach, you can give us a call. We can schedule a time to talk. You can shoot us an email with different things that you want to talk about. We're always available. Our coaching team is fantastic. You've heard some of them on the webinars. They're wonderful and they love to help people. So make sure you reach out if there's anything that we can do for you.